So in this regard, communication is actually, we can say, communication has less to do with the message that has been said, but more to do with what was understood by the receiving end, how they saw it, how they interpreted it, how they processed it. สวัสดีครับ I'm Point, a mental health coach with the Thrive program. Have you ever had this problem where you feel so stuck and perhaps frustrated because no matter what you say does not seem to get through to the other person with whom you're trying to communicate with? They don't seem to quite get the message you're trying to convey, in other words. Especially if this person is somebody who you hold dearly, say a romantic partner, your brother, your sister, your son, or your daughter, your father, or your mother, etc. To understand what's going on here, we have to revisit some of the concepts we've talked about in previous videos and really begin to appreciate and understand the nature of how we process our experiences and how we make sense of our reality. As I mentioned in a video titled Reality Just Is, we don't actually experience reality for what it truly is. What we experience and what we consider to be reality is actually nothing but the result of the interpretation and the way that we look at a given situation. In other words, what we experience and what we call reality is actually a result of the way that we think about a situation, the way that we interpret a certain situation, interpret a certain experience, the way in which we process that experience and make some sense or meaning that forms some base of understanding for us. Let me give you this example. How is it that you can navigate through each and every day in your life? Because at any given moment, you've got so much information bombarding your senses, your brain, for example. And how does your brain know what information to pay attention to? So therefore, your brain has to select information that's available and process it in a way that makes sense to you. In doing so, you construct a map of your reality per se, but from your perspective, you feel and believe it to be true. Now, when your brain gives something meaning and interprets something, it usually compares it to something which it already understands, which it already knows. In other words, it compares it to a previous experience. But you can begin to see the slight problem here. What this implies is the potential for biases. In psychological terms, we call this confirmation bias, right? We have a tendency to give meaning or to interpret things in a way that confirms the previous belief system that we hold, right? And we think it to be true. Now, if the way in which our brain processes information is a result of these processes, then no doubt other people also have and go through the same processes. So in this regard, communication is actually, we can say, communication has less to do with the message that has been said, but more to do with what was understood by the receiving end, how they saw it, how they interpreted it, how they processed it, in accordance with their confirmation biases. An example is this. Say somebody who has a very low self-esteem. By definition, that person doesn't really see their self-worth. They don't think that they are a lovable person. They haven't fully loved or accepted themselves, right? That's how they see themselves. Say they have a friend who sees that they're struggling with this issue and tries to cheer them up, tries to compliment them on how such a wonderful person they are as a friend, how caring they are, how much they are loved by their friend circles, by their family, etc. How do you think that person with low self-esteem, how do you think he or she will likely interpret the message that was delivered? Would they agree with the other person who's trying to give them a compliment? Unlikely, as long as that person is still holding a negative lens, a negative self-belief about himself or herself. The way that individual with low self-esteem is likely to hear and see and understand the message goes more along the lines of something like this. That friend, they're just saying that because they're a friend, and a friend is supposed to compliment another person. But deep down, I know that I'm not really worthy. I haven't accomplished much in my life. I'm not livable. My friend's just being nice. He just cares for me. She just cares for me. But I appreciate that, but I'm just not livable. So you see how our mind distorts and perceives things in a way that tends to conform, not challenge, a pre-existing belief that we hold. So this gives rise to potential for miscommunication or a lot of frustration indeed, especially if that interpersonal communications has to do with somebody in our close circle of relationships, say a loved one or a romantic partner. But what I want to lay out here in this video is not so much about what do we do to the other person or how do we communicate with the other person, but really to get us to, first of all, begin to really understand and appreciate the psychological processes at play here. Because if we begin to truly understand and appreciate and see these mechanisms operating in ourselves, we can therefore have more understanding about the processes and information that goes on in the other person. This understanding helps us to develop patience, and it helps us to perhaps not feel guilty or not blame ourselves in the communication with the other person who may not understand the main point that we're trying to get through to them. The reason I bring this up in today's video is because I see this a lot, and it's quite unfortunate that this continues to happen quite often, especially in circles of family, when in fact there are ways to work around it. So the person who's trying to show the other side, who say in this example is struggling with low self-esteem, the harder you try to show that person how lovable and valuable they are through communication, you might question yourself why can they not see it the way that you see it. And you might blame yourself, you might feel guilty, you might feel frustrated. And this understanding hopefully sheds light for you to take a step back, regain perspective, and no need to be so hard on yourself, no need to blame yourself. With understanding, we have more patience for the other person. We don't need to react with self-blame or react with anger if they don't understand us. We can react more with understanding and compassion. And by the way, a small tip on communications is when we truly listen to understand the other person's perspective. Only when we first truly listen and make them feel that they have been heard in a non-judgmental way. Only when they have felt that they have been understood by you and not judged by you. Only then will there be a window of opportunity for them to start to hear what you have to say. Because truth of the matter is, we don't like, or we have a low chance of entertaining somebody else's perspective until we first feel that we have been heard and understood. So with this understanding in mind, I hope it gives us a reminder to understand that we all operate from our own perspectives, from our own lens, which we use to look at and make sense of our reality. Appreciating this makes us, understand that because we're stuck in our perspective, we have little wiggle room with which to sometimes play with and with which to see this, which is why we often forget this concept when we deal with other people. And that's why we often get frustrated or even angry or upset when we feel that our communication has not gotten through in the way that we would hope for. Again, with this understanding, we develop and cultivate more patience, reminding ourselves about the mechanism, the psychological mechanism at play here. And once we remind ourselves, we begin to change the perspective or the approach from saying something in order to get them to agree with us to something more towards the realm of understanding and compassion. Listen first, listen with your heart, try to understand truly how they see things, and from that position, we are more empowered or have the highest opportunity to communicate more effectively. I wanted to share this in today's video as food for thought. Because again, I see this happen quite a lot especially in family circles where both sides have really good intentions for each other, but it's quite a shame and quite unfortunate that it leads to arguments and leads to conflict and leads to misunderstandings and leads to the other side feeling misunderstood or judged or unloved or unaccepted by the other. Again, the key to communication is first to really listen, to genuinely want to understand the other side, understand how they see the world, and from then on, see where that takes you. Okay, I hope this was valuable for you. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget, I'm on other social media platforms now. Information should be on the screen, so please do follow me there. Please give a like to the video if you found it was valuable, and please like my page or subscribe to my YouTube channel if you found it was valuable. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. สวัสดีครับ